Welcome to Laguna Woods Show, where every guest matters. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Norman Jones, and he's a Korean War veteran, and this is part 2 of the interview. Hi.
And how are you this morning?
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, thank you. You had so many stories. I had to have you back. And you were in the Korean War, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us, what did you do in the war? Yeah, I know it's...
Well, first of all, when you first join or whenever you're drafted, you go to where you spend anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks in basic training.
Yeah.
Then you go to, if you're lucky, you go to another kind of school of what kind of thing you're going to be in the service.
Yeah.
So I went to Fort Ord, California, and then from there I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia. From there I went to Washington, D.C., and I got involved with the military intelligence. At that time, the CIA had just started, so the CIA at that time would only have veterans or people in the service. But after that, then they become their own place.
And you were an interpreter at one point?
No, I have what they call a stigma in my eye that I can tell the difference between camouflage and real.
Ah.
So very few people know about it.
Yeah.
And the CIA heard about it, and so they would sometimes then bring me in aerial photography to read.
Wow.
That's when I was over in Japan.
Okay, so you start writing a diary. Why did you write a diary? What did you write in it?
My father was in the First World War.
Yeah.
And he was told by his dad to write everything down every day to make a remembrance. And so I decided to do the same thing. So I started a diary with in July of '48, and then they took it away from me. And
yeah, they took it away from. How did they find out that you have a diary?
Well, of course they would see me writing once, but when they were looking for me to send me to OCS in the combat zone,
yeah.
I was supposed to get some documents from one of the people that was the South Korean.
Yeah.
And so I had left, and then he told the colonel that he had some things to give me to help me with my daily diary.
Yeah.
And the colonel says, "What daily diary?" And so that's how they found out.
Oh. So you met General Douglas MacArthur. How did you meet him? In a convoy? You say you saw them in a convoy?
Well, of course, I met him when I first went to Japan.
Yeah.
As I said before, that a lot of times when they'd have me bring in top secret documents from the safe,
yeah.
They would have me sit in and listen to what was going on. So I had a business relationship with General MacArthur because of what I would do. But we had a different office than him. He had his own office, and then I was in military intelligence. We had our own office also.
Tell us about the binocular that he used, your binocular.
We were up at the overlooking the Han River in South Korea, and MacArthur come up. Probably it was about the 4th day of the war, and I had field glasses, very long ones, and then of course officer's glasses are very short. And he saw me, and he come over and he said, "Can I borrow your glasses?" And I said, "Naturally." And so he took them, and then he walked up a hill, and he talked to Jenna Willoughby, and then Willoughby come down with him, and he handed back the glasses and thank you for the use.
Wow.
At that time, I heard him say, get everybody off their beds, we're going to blow it to hell.
So did he blow up the?
Well, later on it was
bridge?
blown up.
Wow, isn't that something? Now you said that the war could have been avoided. You want to?
Right.
Okay, can you tell us about it?
Well, this we found out later with the document. The document is called number 68, and in April of 1950, the commanding general and also the Pentagon and President Truman, they had a big meeting, and that they decided that they would make this document to advance for the next 10 years, the next 5 years. So in that document, it says, one of the paragraphs said that it would keep all of the Americans what's going on around the world. And then they had another paragraph in there that says that if the communists, talking about Russia at the time,
Yeah.
that if they ever invaded a country or subverting a country to throw it over, that we would go to their rescue.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that we use to go to the rescue. But because it said that they would keep everybody notified, it was top secret and put away, and nobody knew what was going on until 25 years later.
And now there are papers about
Yeah.
it.
So
now?
otherwise, if they would have kept the American people what was going on, then the Russians would know. So then there'd be no invasion. Very, very controversial document.
Yeah, wow, that's really something. Now, what about, going back to the war, what about mountain men? Do you want to talk about that?
Well, mountain men, I gave them a nickname that they were like Indians.
Yeah.
They were back in of course, a lot of mountains in Korea.
Yeah.
And we went up and was talking with them, and I had an interpreter with me. And I also had a camera, so when they got to talking back and forth, I decided, well, I'd take a picture of them because they looked like American Indians.
Yeah.
Except they had more clothes on. And so I got my camera out and I started to shoot it, and the guy pulled out his knife and started walking towards me, and the interpreter said, wait just a minute, and they talked back and forth in Korean, and they finally ended up giving them $50, and so they didn't skin me alive.
Oh my
But they
God.
actually pulled out their knives, were walking towards me.
Oh my God.
So I was pretty scared.
Oh wow. Then you had another incident with a snake. They called you Hollywood Cowboy Snake. What happened then?
Well, there was a break-in at a storage in Sasebo, Korea.
Yeah.
Japan. I'm sorry. And so we investigated it, and I was walking in the front door, and the major was ahead of me, and of course, we call him Admiral.
Yeah.
And so he went in because he could read what was written on the boxes, so we could tell how many boxes were left.
Yeah.
And so then we had two other gentlemen from another place that were checking all over in the outside cave. And all of a sudden I hear this yelling back and forth that sounded like snakes. So I ran into the cave where the storage was, and I see him over in the corner. It looked like there were about 3 or 4 snakes right in front of him. And of course the snakes over there, most of them are rattlers.
Yeah.
So the quickest thing I had dawned on me that I had a revolver, and so I pulled out the revolver and I shot 2 snakes, and the other snake went underneath boxes.
They cornered him, huh? They cornered him.
And so what he was so surprised and happy, he ran at me and jumped at me and saved me from the snakes. And we both fell over into a ditch that had a lot of water in it.
Yeah.
So then the other two people that come in, they heard him yell also. So they come in and they saw us laying in the mud and laughing about it.
Okay, well, last time you mentioned that you knew Nixon, and this is a letter. I don't know if you can see it, I guess. From Nixon.
Right.
Okay, you said to Nixon, go to hell. Can you talk about it? This was when he was vice president, right?
Right. He was vice president under Eisenhower.
Yeah.
And in labor relations, whenever there is a company that's involved with military, if they have a labor dispute and if the companies and the labor union can't get together, then they called in a federal mediator.
Yeah.
So I had a company that made TVs in Los Angeles. I won't mention the name.
Yeah.
And they also had a division that would make a bomb that would twirl, and so they could guide it easier. And so we were invited back to Washington because we had this dispute on the contract. So we were in one room, and the union was in another room, and this went on for a whole day long. And so all of a sudden, the gentleman that was the head of the federal mediation brought in the vice president to try to influence us.
Yeah.
And that was quite a surprise to me. Anyway, so we could get back and forth, and so we went for about 4 more hours. And I was very unhappy and very, very tired. And so Nixon came in and he said, we've decided that if you give the union what they want, we'll just, the military will increase the purchase of the bomb, and so otherwise everybody should be happy. And I said, well, I wouldn't be happy because that would cost more money, and that would be taxes for me. And then he said, well, that's what the best way. And I said, go to hell. And it surprised me and it surprised him. We just looked at each other and sort of shook his head.
You had another run-in with Bobby Kennedy.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
With Bobby Kennedy and John, his brother was president of the United States.
Yeah.
His brother was the Attorney General. And this was the problem with Chavez, the Grape Workers Union.
Yeah.
He was down in Coachella Valley, and all of the police officers and everything knew him, and of course they didn't like him for what he was doing.
Yeah.
So at that time, the cars didn't have signals. We had to put out our hand if we made a left-hand turn or right-hand turn.
Yeah.
So they would follow him, and if he didn't put out his hand, then they'd pull him over and give him a ticket.
Yeah.
So they pulled him over and gave him a ticket, and then he didn't put his hand out when they pulled away from the curb, so then they gave him another ticket.
Yes.
So anyway, they ended up by putting him in jail. So I get a call from from the police chief saying that he had a call from
Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah. The vice president.
Yeah.
And he said, I've given him your telephone number.
Yeah.
And I said, well, fine. And so about that time, I was called that somebody wanted me on the phone from Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So here it was, Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah.
And Bobby Kennedy said that I understand that you represent a lot of people in the grape industry. And I said, yes. And he said, I've heard everything that you've done with Chavez. And if he doesn't get out of the jail within 24 hours, and if you guys don't leave him alone, I'll make sure that I'll put you away and you'll never come out.
Oh,
so he scared the hell out of me. Here the president's brother who was the Attorney General, had taken me that. That was interesting. So right away I'd call the sheriff's office and they released Chavez. That was right after that I went down and two of us were followed in a car and the guy next to me, my friend, we were both shot and I had pellets in my shoulder and he died of
Wow, they wanted to assassinate you?
I'm sorry?
They wanted to assassinate you?
Yeah, right. And then they also tried to assassinate my wife and my son.
How? I mean...
So I had to send them back to...
Wow. Okay, so let's see. Okay, what about casket? You have a casket, you want to talk about it?
The casket? Well, this is, as I said, in 1990, I met the Korean War Vet Association, and they wanted me to find out about the missing in action, 8,500 guys. So I negotiated with the North Koreans, and when they brought them back the first time, 5 of them, and so then when they were returning, they were taken over to Hawaii in the caskets, and they went through all the procedures to try to find out who they were.
Yeah.
And so then they were shipped back to Japan to be sent back to North Korea.
Yeah.
And that was the time that I got a call from the general saying that they had the casket. I told them I'd like to have one. And they said, well, it might cause a problem. And he said, we'll take care of it. So I flew over to Japan and picked up the original casket that brought back the first remains.
Wow.
So I have that in the garage. And
you still have it, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
and then, of course, now with what our President Trump did, he brought back the remains, but they brought it back in a big box.
Yeah.
And the North Koreans would carry it.
I have that.
And then, so anyway, that's the difference. So I'm the only one that ever has a casket, I guess, in the whole world, other than.
Well, you were instrumental with the police force working 10 hours a day.
Right.
How did you do that?
Well, I represented the city of Monterey Park in California.
Yeah.
And the police at that time had a contract with the city, and we went up for renegotiations, and we decided that when the policeman sitting in a car, they can work 2 hours more a day, and then get out sitting having 2 days off. They can get 3 days off. So we proposed it to the union, and that basically is the one that started the 4-day week.
Wow, you started.
So I guess I'm good or bad blamed on that.
That's really something. That's big. Oh my God. Okay, there's another. How about Disney? You have a story with Disney?
I'm sorry, Disney?
You have a story with Disney? Not Walt, Ray? Ray Disney?
Well, of course, everybody knows everybody knows about Walt Disney.
Yes.
But he had a brother.
Yeah.
That was the brains behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so his brother had a son that had a small company, and I represented the small company. And so I also met Walt Disney at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I said I always wanted to have a souvenir from you people. So what they did is they gave me a actually ship that they were using called Captain Blood.
Yeah.
And they also gave me the Tinkerbell little ferry. So I have those. So I give them to my son.
Wow.
One of my sons.
Now, in October 1950, they were looking for you to be on the OCS. You want to talk about that? OCS, yeah.
Well, I was in the combat zone in Korea.
Yeah.
And they'd been looking for me since September
Yeah.
10th
Yeah.
of 1950, and they didn't find me until October 4th.
Yeah.
And so that's the time that I was told by a colonel from the military intelligence that I was going to be recommended to be sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, to the Officers Candidate School.
Yes. Yes.
So they put me on a small plane. From there, I flew over to Japan.
Yeah.
Jenna Willoughby and Colonel Bratton met me at the airport, and also the head of the CIA at the time was. So we met it. So anyway, that was my send-off.
That's how it comes. Okay. At one point, you met the Queen Mother. Want to talk about that?
Yes. Going back to the Korean War. I met a lot of British people over there, the troops, and I met a captain, and he and I were riding in a Jeep, and a mortar shell knocked the Jeep off the road.
Yeah.
And we both fell into a ditch. And so that's when I got wounded a second time.
Yeah.
So after that, he and I were always corresponded after I got out of the service.
Yeah.
And so he called. I was in Europe at the time, representing a company in France, and I got a call from my home saying that he was trying to get a hold of me. So I called him, and he said that his son and daughter did work for the Queen Mum.
Yeah.
And that they were going to retire, and they're going to put on a big shindig. And would I like to go? Well, right away, when you talk about Queen Mum, she was the mother of Queen Elizabeth.
Yes.
So then I flew to London. I went to the luncheon.
Yeah.
And I was sitting across from Queen Mum, and she was watching me, and she said, I noticed that you don't drink your tea. And I said, no, I don't believe in drinking tea. And she said, do you believe in drinking coffee? And I said, no. And she said, do you believe in smoking cigarettes? And I said, no. And she said, you must be a Mormon. And I said, yes. She said, well, I have some very good friends that are Mormons. So she said, would you mind, we'll replace the tea with a 7-Up. So she gave me a 7-Up.
Oh, 7-Up.
So that was an interesting conversation.
Wow. Let's see. You took a lot of bullets. How many bullets did you take? I mean, like 3 or 4?
I took a bullet in the leg. I took shrapnel in my leg. I took shrapnel in my neck.
Yeah.
And then...
You were saying about a story about the way you got the hit in your neck. You didn't even know it was a bullet?
Yes.
Yeah, where was that?
I was captured a few days, and I broke away.
Yeah.
And I ran up the side of the hill to get into a small cave.
Yeah.
And the North Koreans saw me, and of course they knew about it. So they shelled the area and hit the cave, and the cave caved in on me.
Yeah.
And knocked me out for I don't know how many hours I was out of thing. And I always thought that every once in a while, and after I got out of the service, I'd have a headache.
Yeah.
Depending on how I laid.
Yeah.
So finally the doctors, they did a lot of investigation and x-rays, and they discovered that I had a very small piece of shrapnel in my neck.
Wow.
So that was four years after I was out of the service that they found that out.
Wow. You didn't know, huh?
So I had to have that operated. So that was my 4th so-called Purple Heart.
Purple hearts. Whenever you get hit, you
So
get a
anyway, I
Purple
was out of the
Heart.
service, so, but anyway, that's the fourth one.
Yeah, you told me that you met at one point Margaret
Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
No,
Okay, you want to do it next time? Okay,
I would rather not.
okay.
But she was a very good friend of President Reagan,
Yeah.
and that's where I met her at the White House.
Oh, you met at the White House.
Yes. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yes. Did you go many times to the White House? I mean,
Yes, I had interesting because the background that the president had, he was head of the labor union, and of course I was representing management.
yeah.
But he never wanted to let people know that he was getting information from an anti-union guy like me.
Yeah.
So I was always allowed to have a secret pass to go into the White House
Yeah.
when
Wow.
called, and
Secret
also
pass.
I had a pass that whenever I'd make phone calls, get through to.
Oh, wow. Oh, you know what? We're running out of time again. We ran out of time. It was so nice having you.
Good. Well, I hope that if I have more time that I would bring us some documents that would prove a lot of things that should have not happened.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, and next time we'll have another interesting guest.